At 2:41 p.m., Iran fired 24 missiles at the USS Eisenhower in the Strait of Hormuz. Every single one was intercepted. 38 minutes later, 14 Iranian bases were completely destroyed. Hit subscribe now, because what happened next proves why you never fire at American carriers. The perfect ambush that wasn't the perfect ambush that wasn't. The Strait of Hormuz is just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, and 21 million barrels of oil pass through it every single day. That's 1 to 5 IF of the world's petroleum supply squeezed through a gap you could cross in 20 minutes by speedboat. On this particular afternoon, the USS Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group, Music, was doing what it had done hundreds of times, a standard freedom of navigation transit through international waters, Music. But Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders saw an opportunity they couldn't resist. The carrier would pass through the narrowest section with Iranian territory, surrounding it on three sides, hemmed in by shallow waters and shipping lanes. At 2:38 p.m., 6 coastal missile batteries received their final orders, Music. And 90 seconds later, 24 C-802 anti-H ship missiles were airborne. But what the Iranians didn't know was that every single one of those missile batteries had been under 247 satellite surveillance for the past 8 months. And the moment they lit up their targeting radars, they signed their own death warrants. 4 minutes of mathematical perfection. 4 minutes of mathematical perfection. The Iranian missiles weren't some outdated Soviet relics. These were modern Chinese-designed C-802s. Music, capable of Mach 0.9, and equipped with active radar homing that made them fire and forget weapons. Iran had done the math. Launch everything at once from different angles, Music, create a saturation attack that overwhelms defensive systems, and at least some missiles would get through. What they didn't account for was the Aegis combat system. The 4 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers surrounding the Eisenhower Music were each equipped with Spy-1 phased array radars capable of tracking over 100 targets simultaneously, Music, and engaging 18 of them at once. Within 2.3 seconds, the Aegis computers had assigned each incoming missile to a specific interceptor, calculated intercept points, and began launching SM-6 and SM-2 missiles. The first Iranian missile died 80 kilometers out. By the time the Iranian missiles reached the 30-kilometer mark, 14 of them had already been vaporized. At 5 kilometers out, only 6 Iranian missiles remained. Then the Phalanx CIWS engaged. 6 rotating 20mm Gatling guns capable of firing 4,500 rounds per minute, creating a literal wall of tungsten in the sky. One missile broke through every layer, screaming toward the Eisenhower's flight deck at 600 mm. The final missile exploded 800 mm from the carrier, close enough that sailors on deck could see the fireball. But here's what makes this terrifying. While this 4-minute air battle was happening, the American counterattack had already launched, Music, the response Iran never saw coming response. Iran never saw coming. At 2:42 p.m., while 24 Iranian missiles were still in flight toward the carrier, the USS Gravely's first Tomahawk cruise missile broke the surface of the Persian Gulf. This wasn't a reactive strike. This was pre-planned annihilation. U.S. 5th Fleet Headquarters in Bahrain had wargamed this exact scenario 11 times over the past 6 months, and every single Iranian installation involved in coastal defense operations was already in the targeting database. By 2:46 p.m., 96 Tomahawk missiles Music were airborne from 5 American warships, each one programmed with GPS coordinates accurate Music to within 3 mem. 16 FA-18 Super Hornets launched from Eisenhower's deck at 2:47 p.m., each loaded with AGM-154 Joint Standoff Weapons Music Glide, bombs that could hit targets 70 miles away. At 2:49 p.m., 4 EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft joined them, Music, and suddenly every Iranian radar system along the coast went blind. Music, then came the submarine. USS Michigan, an Ohio-class guided missile submarine, had been sitting 40 miles offshore in 200 FT of water, Music completely invisible. At 2:52 p.m., she fired 60 Tomahawk missiles in under 4 minutes, underwater launches that turned the Gulf surface into a forest of rocket motors. And here's the question nobody asks. If Iran knew their missiles would all be shot down, why did they fire anyway? 38. Minutes to erase 40 years, minutes to erase 40 years. The first Tomahawk missiles reached the Iranian coastline at 2:58 p.m., and Battery Alpha near Bandar Abbas, the primary launch site that had fired 6 missiles at the carrier, was hit by 6 Tomahawks within 11 seconds of each other. Each missile carried a 1,000 lb warhead, Music, and when they detonated simultaneously, the entire battery complex simply ceased to exist. Music batteries, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, and Foxtrot, followed within 90 seconds. All 6 missile sites that had fired at the Eisenhower were erased from the map before their crews could even evacuate. At 2:59 p.m., the FA-18s fired 32 AGM-88 HARM missiles, high-speed anti-radiation weapons that home in on radar emissions like heat-seeking missiles track jet engines. 8 Iranian early warning radar stations along the coast were obliterated, their massive radar dishes crumpling as explosions tore through control buildings. At 3:03 p.m., the second wave of Tomahawks hit ammunition storage depots, and what happened next was visible from space. 6 massive ammunition bunkers detonated in chain reactions. The explosions were so powerful that seismometers in Bahrain, 150 miles away, registered them as minor earthquakes. Then the heavy bombers arrived. 2 B-52 Stratofortress aircraft, each carrying 36 precision-guided bombs, struck the Revolutionary Guard Naval Headquarters in Bandar Abbas. The structure, which had stood for 35 years, collapsed completely, burying command staff and communications equipment under thousands of tons of concrete and steel. The cost of firing, first. By 3:19 p.m., exactly 38 minutes after Iran fired the first missile, the operational assessment was complete. 6 coastal missile batteries destroyed. Music. 8 radar installations obliterated. 4 command bunkers collapsed or penetrated. 6 ammunition storage facilities. Music. Secondary explosions still ongoing. 4 Revolutionary Guard naval bases. Infrastructure rendered non-functional. The human cost was staggering. Music. Initial estimates put Iranian Revolutionary Guard casualties at 1,123 personnel killed or wounded in the strikes. Meanwhile, American casualties stood at exactly 0, not a single. Sailor wounded, not one aircraft damaged, not one ship scratched. The asymmetry was absolute. Iran fired 24 missiles and Music lost 14 bases. They launched a $50 million attack and suffered $2.3 billion in infrastructure damage. But here's what really changed. Iran had spent 4 decades building that coastal defense network. Billions of dollars, thousands of personnel, hundreds of missile systems, all designed to turn the Strait of Hormuz into an Iranian lake where American carriers couldn't operate, and in 38 minutes it was reduced to smoking rubble and twisted steel. The propaganda war. Iran couldn't win war. Iran couldn't win. Within 2 hours of the strikes, Iranian state television was broadcasting a very different version of events. Music. According to Press TV, the heroic Revolutionary Guard Navy conducted defensive operation against American military aggression, and the enemy carrier group was forced to retreat. They claimed only minor music damage to military facilities from cowardly American missile attacks, and declared it a victory for Iranian sovereignty. The problem with that narrative, satellite imagery doesn't lie. Commercial satellites from Planet Labs and Maxar Technologies photographed the strike sites within 6 hours. The images showed Battery Alpha near Bandar Abbas completely flattened, nothing but blast craters where launch vehicles had been. Lloyd's of London issued an immediate assessment. Music, Iranian coastal defense capability had been reduced by an estimated 60%. Music, and the threat level to commercial vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz had dropped significantly. Insurance premiums for tankers, which had spiked 4% immediately after the Iranian missile launch, fell back to normal levels within 24 hours. Oil prices followed the same pattern. A brief spike to $87 per barrel when news of the attack broke, then a rapid decline back to $83 as the Eisenhower completed its transit unharmed. But here's the real question. If Iran's coastal defenses were so easily destroyed, why did they build them in the first place? The music lesson. The lesson. Every military is learning. Every military is learning. The strategic implications of those 38 minutes are still reverberating through defense ministries worldwide. Iran demonstrated that even a well-planned, coordinated anti-H-ship missile attack, 24 missiles launched simultaneously from concealed coastal batteries against a carrier group in restricted waters, achieves exactly nothing against modern American naval defenses. That's a 0% success rate under ideal attack conditions. China is watching closely because their strategy for countering American carriers in the Taiwan Strait relies on similar saturation attacks, just with more missiles. The carrier strike group, which some analysts had declared vulnerable in the age of hypersonic missiles and advanced anti-H-ship weapons, just proved it remains the most survivable offensive platform on Earth. But the real lesson isn't about defense, it's about response. Iran's attack lasted 4 minutes. The American counterstrike lasted 38 minutes, and music erased 40 years of military infrastructure. The Strait of Hormuz remains open. 21 million barrels of oil still flow through it daily. American carriers transit freely. At 2:41 p.m., Iran tried to sink an American carrier. At 3:19 p.m., they learned why nobody has successfully attacked a U.S. carrier since World War II. The math is simple. 24 missiles fired, 24 missiles destroyed, 14 bases eliminated. Never fire at carriers. Iran fired 24 missiles conclusion and lost 14 bases in 38 minutes. That's the cost of attacking American carriers. If this breakdown showed you how modern naval warfare actually works, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon because we're covering more military operations that changed everything.